All right, let's go ahead and get this morning kicked off. You all are fantastic for being here. Thank you so much for literally making my day by showing up. Really appreciate it. My name is Tim Markle. I work for the Weisman Center as director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. Also work with an initiative called the Youth Health Transition Initiative. But today I am also representing the Leadership Education, Neurodiversity and Other Developmental Disabilities training program, who releases a little bit of my time to help me get to know you guys, help planning teams plan things, and try to make sure everything shows up. But I certainly don't do any of this alone. We have a steering team. One of our co-chairs, Ann Harris, is unable to be with us tonight. She is also from the Weisman Center. We do have Kelly Brodhagen from the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin, as Kelly waves. Thanks, Kelly. Kelly is also a co-chair. She is also a parent with lived experience with child with autism, as am I. Today, we are especially grateful to the Supporting Neurodiverse Students Professional Learning System, CESA 1, Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, for being able to fund some special speakers to come in today. So there is no one group that is behind the community of practice on autism spectrum disorder and developmental disabilities. It grew out of a grant that started over 13 years ago. And since then, the CoP ASD has held usually 2 to 3 gatherings a year, trying to bring people together to learn about the system together, to share what's happening around Wisconsin, to open those doors to collaboration and new partnerships, in the hopes that we can improve the system of care, that we can improve for providers, that we can improve it for families, that we can improve it for self-advocates, that we truly are gathering to learn so that we can then put it in action and make a difference. And in that frame, one of the things that gets really hard is that back in the day, which now, that used to mean like the 1920s, 1930s. Now, when somebody says back in the day, of course, it means pre-COVID. So back in the day, when we would gather in large groups and venues, we would have awesome people that would run the microphone around, and we would be able to get updates from across the state. This has gotten a little more challenging. So what I would love to do is yes, we have time to open it up. If anybody has trainings, events, upcoming legislative issues, things that they are seeing that they want to share for the good of the group around autism and developmental disabilities, please raise your hand. We'll do our best to then call on you, although I know that Christy right now is doing our awesome registration, and Christy from CESA 1 can't do this without her. Just plain and simple, this would not happen if we did not have Christy Schroeder. So if there's anything that you would like to share for the good of the group, please feel free to raise your hand, which you can do using the bar down on the bottom of your screen under reactions. If you have your camera on, if you wave furiously, we'll also try to see you. But I would also encourage you, if you have stuff to share with the group, please put it into the chat. We will put together a resource sheet, or at least an upcoming event sheet, and get that sent out to all registrants. So please do feel free to use the chat for that. That was fun. Anybody have anything that you would like to share for the good of the group? Oh, you awesome people. It takes a little while to, be able to get through all the screens. I see Angie Schubert has her hand raised.
Hi, I am going to be working with the Autism Society of Southeastern Wisconsin, and I just wanted to let you all know that we will be starting a new group starting in July that is going to try to focus on the Tri-County area of Waukesha, Walworth, and Racine County. So watch for information about that. We'll be running a parent support group along with a speaker each first Thursday night of the month. So that'll start in July. So if you watch the Autism Society of Southeastern Wisconsin's website, there'll be more information about that, but it's going to be held in McGuanago, and we kind of picked that area because we can pull from Racine County, Walworth County, and Waukesha County. It's kind of right in that corner of all those 3 counties. So I'll be actually facilitating that group. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll have more information. We have it planned through December, so it will be the first Thursday of every month, July through December for now, and if it takes off, we'll continue with it.
Thank you, Angie. Looks like James Williams has his hand up as well.
I'm happy to announce that anime conventions in Wisconsin, which I am known for sharing information about, are back up and running. The next anime conventions have become the basis of a little-known social network for autistic adults in our state. The next one is going to be KitsuneCon, which is the KI Convention Center on July 22nd through 24th. In addition, although DaishoCon sadly came to an end, that convention was November 18th through 20th in the Wisconsin Dells at the Kalahari Resort. That convention successfully was able to change ownership from DaishoCon, which could no longer support it, and now has been rebranded as Colossal Con North during the same time. Basically, the DaishoCon, the convention is under new leadership, but it's the same time, November 18th through 20th in the Wisconsin Dells.
Thank you, James. Will you be able to put that information into the chat for us as well?
Yes.
As you now personally know that my note-taking skills suck. So I'm glad that you're here, James. Kelly.
Hi, I just wanted to let everyone know that the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin offers a new to autism virtual parent support group, caregiver support group. So we run this monthly on the 3rd Monday of each month, and I can put information into the chat box. So we try to help parents who are new to the diagnosis, help them find resources, and just have an opportunity to network with other families. So it's very appropriate to this group. So thank you.
And I am going to just piggyback on Kelly's. I was at the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin conference last week, and for the first time in anybody's memory, when the dads group gathered, we almost ran out of chairs. We are used to having 4, 5 guys, dads there, and we usually know each other. There were over 30 men there. And so I am really excited that there is a growing number of fathers that are, they've always been involved, but are starting to reach out and look for support and look to support each other and to grow the network, so dads. And so I'm very grateful for the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin, who holds a dad's virtual support group, usually the 3rd Sunday of the month. And so I'll be sending information out about that so that we can continue to empower our dads, like myself, to continue to be active, growing, learning participants in the network. Becky, did you have something else, Kelly?
No, I don't know how to take my hand down.
That's okay. Becky Thompson.
Hey there, good morning, everybody. I'm Becky Thompson with the Wisconsin Early Autism Project, and I also represent the Wisconsin Autism Providers Association, which is a group of different autism treatment providers that team up and work together to help advocate for equity and access to services. We all know that there's not enough services available in the first place, and then certainly for kiddos who have Medicaid as their primary funding, it's even more difficult to access services. And so I just wanted to share with the group that at present, we've been working with DHS to try and help cut the red tape and increase resources for many years now. And our current initiative is trying to help get increased funding and support around supervision in behavioral treatment, which is both ABA and ESDM services. And we've got a petition open right now, which I'll put in the chat, just trying to show support to just communicate to DHS what an important issue this is, of how difficult it is for families to access service who are seeking services. So anyone who's willing to take a look and sign or share the petition, we'd very much appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to this morning.
Thank you, Tracy. You want to go ahead?
Morning. We are having a rainbow day camp here at Vision Forward, and this is for children with vision loss in addition to other disabilities, but specifically it's Monday, July 18th through the 21st. It's $40 for the child to do, and they get breakfast, lunch, and produce from the garden, a camp t-shirt. It's really a cool event. And if you don't have a child with vision loss, but you are interested in volunteering, we also will take any volunteers that will be willing to give their time. It's a really awesome experience for the kids to be able to participate with their peers and learn different sports and recreation. So if you're able to, you can reach out to me or Vision Forward for more information. Thanks.
Thank you. And there was a question in the chat about teen groups around the Madison, teenage social skills groups around the Madison area. We've already had one person putting in thoughts, but please do check out the chat, and please any suggestions that you might have. We of course work with all 3 autism affiliates within Wisconsin, and so I would encourage you to call your local autism affiliate, and we'll try to get those information in the chat, as well as we work with 5 regional centers for children and youth with special healthcare needs across the state, which also could be a good connection for resources to connect parents, families, and providers to resources in their area. Sometimes, of course, we all work together and we find out that nothing exists. The thing that we exist isn't there. And so hopefully we then get a group together and can do something, or somebody will do it. But the system's still broken. I think we probably said that 13 years ago. And even though various parts of it has improved, various parts of it has also dipped. And so we continue to work for a more equitable situation for our families. So with that, any other things going on in Wisconsin, please feel free to put on the chat. But I am just so totally excited because, again, of the support of the DPI, is we are able to welcome in Dr. Christy Preddy-Francic and Dr. Julie Costin. We are going to learn alongside of them about inclusive early education. We're going to come away with some practical strategies, talking about lessons and activities, just right supports, how to shift mindsets, and okay, that's enough out of me. I am excited to be here to learn. And so we'd like to welcome, if you know how to use your reaction emojis, feel free to clap, celebrate. I'll be celebrating, and that's what that looks like, the presence of Dr. Christy and Dr. Julie. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to go quietly.
No worries. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Yeah, good to see you all.
Hi, friends.
Sun is shining here in Ohio, and so hopefully it is there across Wisconsin as well. Julie, what's the sun doing there in New York?
Blue skies in New York, believe it or not. So
there you go.
good.
From Wisconsin, which is Julie's favorite state, but don't tell anybody, to New York. We have blue skies and sunshine today.
Yeah. So welcome. We're so excited to meet you all and spend the day together, spend the morning together, I should say. Some things about working with us, we use the chat all the time, and it is not rude to chat any point during the presentation. You can ask questions, comments, thoughts, share thoughts about anything. We love it, and we'll give you more direction about how we typically use the chat. And we also welcome you to keep your cameras on or off. Both are just perfectly fine as long as you are comfortable and it helps you to be more connected, right? Whatever that looks like is great with us, okay?
All right, so we're gonna have we get super excited. So just so you know, it'll get louder and faster for the next 90 minutes. And then at some point, we'll try to rein it in. But we get super excited to be with such amazing early educators and have lots of things we want to discuss with you and explore. And so we have 90 minutes. This first slide is just sort of what we call a set screen. It's just to do a check-in. So we just had a moment to like check in by passing the mic around, and you've got lots of ideas going in your mind. And you might need to go, okay, I want to follow up with that. I want to connect with that person. And it might be kind of buzzing around. Just make yourself a note or mute us for a minute, catch your breath, get more tea or coffee or water, maybe a pillow or a blanket if you're in a space where you have comfort items. Think about, where do you want to take notes today? We even have one that we don't have on the slide, but is like, do you have a back channel? So are you going to direct message people that are in this community this morning in the Zoom chat? Are you going to text them? Are you going to have a Google Drive open and sharing notes? And then just to get some practice, you can follow Becky's lead and go, yep, going to get my coffee now. We're just getting warmed up. You can also drop in the chat something that you're feeling grateful for. So if you want to just be, take a minute and think, I'm grateful for sunshine. I'm grateful for this organization. I'm grateful for coffee, anything like that. Okay?
Okay, so the invitation, there we go. Tracy's kicking it off. Grateful for health. This is an all invite, and it means everyone's invited to write one thing. And some of us need a minute to think about what we're feeling grateful for. And that's perfect too. Good, good, good.
And then we just love to look at the chat and just like appreciate what others are experiencing, you know, from colleagues to their own family. Yep, ready to learn, Mariah. Me too. All right,
Good.
Julie, let's get going. And keep
know
them coming,
this.
y'all.
Just know this, if you're still working on what you're grateful for and we've moved on, please keep chatting. It's all good. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, here we go. We're going to do another chat splash. What is a small win from today? A small win from today. And like, it can be, I have successfully, I know what I've done, so I'm going to not
And you
say
might
out
be
loud.
like, it's barely 9 o'clock. What could I have won already? Well, you found the Zoom link for today's gathering. That's a huge win, right? Yes, somebody's on the bus before the bus leaves.
I got
Yep.
a sub, 2 cups of coffee.
That's like gold.
Oh, our favorite coffee mug, Mariah. Good. Oh, somebody made a beautiful to-do list. That is like, sometimes I need a nap after that. This is good. All my kids brush their teeth. All right, this is an awesome group. I love them already. And then this green one. Oh, Christy, I was going to share that my win for today is I took my dog to daycare. So I
think
feel
that's an excellent move. And you might just like say, this is your new home. That's what I said to mine. I'm like, oh, I'm glad you like it here.
And this next one is share something unique about you. Now, I'm going to share a Wisconsin memory. I will tell you about my Wisconsin connections, but I once won a spam carving contest in Wisconsin of my bust of Abraham Lincoln. So that is something unique that you probably didn't know about me. It can be, thank you, Nikki. It can be anything, and you probably have heard of me in that way. You probably are like, this is the spam carving person. Just kidding. It was
I'll tell you my unique Wisconsin. So one time I was interviewing for a job in Milwaukee, and during the interview, we went to the Clown Hall of Fame in the mall.
Yes.
There's a mall somewhere in Milwaukee that has a Clown Hall of Fame, and it was the actress from Caroline in the City or something like that. What was that old show? I'm dating myself, but anyway, the friend of the main girl was at the Clown Hall of Fame.
Amazing.
Okay, that's all I got. That's up there with the spam.
Yeah, and Sarah got a new air conditioner. This is exciting. We've got favorite movie is Wizard of Oz, which, by the way, Frank Baum lives in Chittenango near here. We've got over decorators for Christmas. I feel like that's a great phrase. Yeah, children with challenging behaviors. A birder, Sarah.
Just don't hang out with Angie because she loves sharks, and I don't know if the two go together.
Keep them coming. This is great. Josh is a twin. And they can be anything at all. Oh, born at 32 weeks, Linda. Cool. Oh, yeah. Home edit. Okay. Keep them coming.
And if you, other than just getting ourselves kind of geared up, one of the reasons that Julie and I spend this morning chunk of time is one of our themes today, or one of your first tips, is that relationships are the active ingredient. So when people think, well, what does it take to get kids to learn or to develop or to make progress or whatever it is our worry, oftentimes we think that it's more therapy, more interventions. And I'm an early interventionist, so I would say even earlier intervention is something that we might say, yes. When you peel it all back, what it comes down to is that relationships are the active ingredient. And we pull that from the Fred Rogers Institute, which is the toothpaste theory. And the theory is that there's one active ingredient in toothpaste. Just like in learning and development, there's one active ingredient. So we like to remind folks that no matter what camp you're in and what types of therapies and interventions, or no matter what your lived experiences are, or what your biases are, or your preferences, or your mindset, or your heart set, when you kind of strip it all away, the top ingredient to learning, to development, to success in life is relationships. So we try to practice what we preach by spending a little bit of time saying this is really important that we know each other and we have an opportunity to foster relationships. So that's your first tip.
The second thing, we just want to have a little bit of guidelines with you all today. And I'm curious, when you look at this screen with these 8 ideas, these guidelines are about our time together, our 90 minutes. I'm just going to pick one. Christy's going to pick one, and then we're going to ask you which one feels right for you today, meaning this one feels really important, okay? And you can put in the chat, like, for me, I'll pick 6. Have grace for yourself and others. So if that is matching what you feel like you need today, put 6 in the chat, right? Or the word grace in the chat. And what I mean by grace is sort of coming here and turning off my outside voices and being present and saying kind things to myself as I learn, and having grace for others. How about you, Christy?
I'm going to build on what Tim said about the systems are broken and that we need more equity. This is just from my own personal journey as a white interventionist and as a white professional development provider. Just sort of number 7, maybe it builds, Julie, on number 6, but number 7 as well, that I can't, I easily buy into the white dominant culture in terms of either or a perfectionist, or a single way, or I love certainty immediately. And so number 7 always reminds me that this is a journey, and that we won't have all the answers today, and that this is just part of the conversation. But the movement towards equity and inclusion is the goal, but it's also the journey, that there's a bit of a urgency about the kids are in front of us right now, not just about who we can become or how much better our system can become. So that's what I'm thinking. Those might be 8 thoughts at once, but yeah, number 7.
That's great. Yeah, good. And we're getting a lot of other ones, like
I
be
see,
responsible for the
a good
energy you
mixture.
bring to the space. Yeah. So all of these are our guidelines, our hopes, our dreams for today, and we take them pretty seriously because we enjoy our time teaching folks, especially folks in Wisconsin. Christy and I are going to introduce ourselves very quickly. This is the 2 of us. We have joined forces and we do professional development all over the world all day long. And so Christy's going to start, and I'm going to give the directions for you all because this is a fun thing. Christy's going to start, and she's just going to introduce herself like a typical introduction. She's going to tell you some things about herself. Every time you have a connection, like she's going to start out to say, Christy, were you born in Idaho? Is that the place?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Christy was, I can't ever remember because they all
It's okay.
It doesn't matter. Idaho. She's going to say, I was born in Idaho. And then you in the chat are going to think, do I have a connection with Idaho? And you're just going to put in the chat any connection at all. You can be fun, you can be light, you can be delightful. You can just make straight up connections by putting me too. That's right, Josh. My twin lives in Idaho and we already, okay, perfect. All right, so Christy's going to start. She's going to go fast. She's going to hide the chat. And you just put any connections you have with her. Ready?
I gotta hide the chat because Nikki, you're making me laugh. Okay, so yes, I was actually born in Utah, and I just lied to Julie. So I was born in Utah, raised in Idaho, went to school in Oregon, and I live in Ohio. So I have an affinity for states that have lots of vowels in them, evidently. But one of the last states that I haven't been to is Alabama. So there you go. So I'm an early interventionist, as I already mentioned. I studied at the University of Oregon to be an early interventionist. I was a home visitor and an early childhood special education teacher. So the pictures of cute kids that you see on the screen are not my kids. They're just some of the very first children I worked with, including children with visual impairments. This is my friend Skylar Green and his sister. And then all kinds of kids with all kinds of abilities. And then, let's see, where was I going? Oh, but I do have one kid, and it's a dog. That's Wizzy, and he's a pandemic puppy. And I have a husband. We've been together since 1988. Somebody can do the math. Sometimes I tell people I've been married over 30 years, and then I have to clarify to the same person. And then I have to say, yes, I was 12 when I got married, because then I don't want you to do too much math. I was faculty at Kent State University for a long time here in Ohio and wrote a lot of books and did a lot of research around inclusion in early intervention, early childhood special education. We often call that an activity-based approach or blended practices. And I've been part of a journey towards creating more authentic assessment since the early 90s. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, Christy, now you're going to have so much fun reading back the chat.
Okay.
Do the same thing, but I have to hide the chat because I love people's comments.
All right, so
okay.
now you can keep playing along if you're still thinking about Idaho, or you can shift gears and learn a little bit about Julie and what your connections are with her.
Okay, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I stayed in Madison for 12 plus years. You're my people. I love it so, so much. I now live in New York. I was born in Minnesota. I got my undergrad and master's and doctorate at University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was a professor at Syracuse University for 14 years. I have a really cute family. And so if you have a cute family, you should probably make that connection too. This is my wife, Ellen. We got married 2 years ago, and these are our kids, Ella and Sam. Sam is at Brown University. Ella's headed to college soon. So I'm about to be an empty nester. I love empty nest advice because I think I'm going to lose my mind. I've written lots of books like Christy, specifically all about inclusive education. So you can see them there. I've also written a book called The Too Much Unicorn. And it's a book about what it's like to be too much in any space that you're in. I'm somebody who has ADHD as an attribute, and you'll probably notice little pieces and parts of that as I present. Like, for example, I couldn't be looking at the chat because I would follow that trail all the way. And I'm just so excited to be here. I taught elementary, middle, and high school in a little bit in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. And now I work with Christy full time. And we were destined.
Oh, speaking of twins.
Josh, this is my twin and it's Christy. Yes, Katie. This is this is our both of us. I know, right? This is our high school picture, both of us. Now we didn't know each other, but don't you think we were meant to work together? Don't you think? And don't you think Christy over on the right looks like Jennifer Grey, the actress? Yes, Katie, duh. Anyway, yeah, there we go. Thank you. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what inclusion is, what it looks like, what it means, especially for neurodiverse students. Becky said nobody puts baby in the corner. We're going to talk about how to become a circle maker and making the transition to an equity lens. And we've got some specific strategies for students with autism, and then we have a closing. And when we say strategies, they're strategies to include students well who have autism or other neurodiversities. All right. Here's our invitation. I'm going to read this part, Christine. You can explain what the invitation means.
Okay.
Amanda Gorman, in one of her spoken word poetry, put this phrase that we just love so much. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And though those words speak volumes to us today as we come together, where we look for the light in our own systems and structures around inclusivity, because there's a lot of beautiful light in Madison and in Wisconsin in general. And we're also going to find those places that need more light. And we're going to talk about that. So Christy, can you be more specific about the invitation today?
Yeah, so as we were talking about, like all of us are kind of excited to learn more, be together to learn. And so that's like really, how can we expand our thinking of inclusivity? Many times we use that phrase, preaching to the choir, if you've heard that before, that the folks that are hearing the message are the ones that already have the mindset and the heart set and the skill set to do something. So we want to even take our current place, no matter where we are, and expand it. We want to think about how can we see the beauty and the creativity in everything, even the people that are resistant. And then in those two invitations, it allows us to create wider and wider circles. And we're going to give you lots of strategies today to break down barriers, to remove barriers, to shift, as Tim highlighted, mindsets and heart sets, and of course your skill sets.
Okay, we're going to kick off this presentation with a video called The Circle Makers. And we were asked by PBS to do a video about inclusive education. So as we do that, here's what your job is going to be. Your job is to simply put so you can sit and relax and watch in any physical position you want, but jot down or draw any connections that you're making to this particular video. It's pretty short. I think it's 4 minutes, Christy?
Maybe a little longer. 5.
Okay, 5 minutes. Okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, my Zoom is asking me for updates to share my audio, so I don't know. Lots of things are happening over here, Joel.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So here we go. Let me get this, and let me know if there's any problem hearing it. Okay.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Costin, and I'm here to talk about what is inclusion with a story that I've written called The Circle Makers. Long ago in schools, we tried to draw lines to make distinctions between students. These lines were drawn in thick, dark ink between people. These lines were drawn to mark the differences between them. These lines were supposed to be helpful. They were supposed to help teachers distinguish between those who could go fast and those who needed to go slow. These lines were meant to help teachers teach the right stuff in the right way. These lines made some people feel comfortable and safe. One problem was there were so many lines that we had to put labels on our lines to keep them straight. General education, special education, learning disabilities, emotional disabilities, gifted and talented English language learners, intellectual disabilities, special education rooms, special education hallways, special education schools. Another problem was when we drew these lines, someone was always on one side and someone was always on the other. Someone was always left out. Someone was always given less. Someone was always wanting to be seen or heard or part of. Another problem was that people assumed that students on one side of the line were typical learners, and that typical was real and that average was true, and that anyone who wasn't average had to go somewhere else to learn something else. The problem was people saw disability as something that needed to be fixed, and it needed to be fixed over there in a different room in a separate space. Eventually, these lines created separate boxes or classrooms, a separate system with separate teachers, classes for students who were thought to need separate things. People even started to think that separate lines and boxes were good. Another problem was every person on both sides of any line had different needs. Every person needed to go fast sometimes and slow at other times. Every person was more curious about certain things and bored by other things. Every person had things they were good at and other things they were not good at. So often the lines were blurry. Sometimes people couldn't agree on where to place the lines. Sometimes even the line makers argued about where to place the lines. These lines and these boxes weren't real, but people thought they were. At the same time, we knew that separate was never equal. We knew that humans needed to be together and belong in order to learn and grow. We knew that separation from other people was likely to affect everyone's hearts and minds. So in education, we decided we had to do something. We had to bend some lines and move some lines and erase others. We had to take all the lines and stick them together end to end. It took a lot of time and a lot of work. This now made a brand new long line that we kept bending and bending and bending. The new line connects end to end. This new line is called inclusive education. This new line is a circle. This new circle was very difficult for the original line makers. You see, when they went to school, straight lines existed. Straight lines were important. They grew up thinking some children belong on certain sides of certain lines. And change is hard, especially for line makers. This new circle is called inclusive education, and it means we value everyone. We use this new line to connect, not to separate. Inclusive education means we are curious about how we are alike and how we are different. We challenge and support everyone. We teach to students' individual strengths. We give students choices. We celebrate what is unique about each person, because we learn best with and from those who are different than us. What happened to the line makers? Turns out line makers are the most excellent circle makers. As soon as they saw that these circles created new opportunities for their students and new connections and a sense of belonging, these circles helped students to do better, to learn more, and to make friends. It turns out that students who used to be on one side of the line were excellent teachers of students who used to be on the other side of the line. And the exact opposite was also true. It turns out that it wasn't just good for students on one side of the line, it ended up to be better for all students on every side of any line. But the story does not end with just drawing the circles. Like a circle, the story has no end. It's simply the beginning. Being together inside the circle is the very first step. It's what happens inside the circles where the true magic can be found. To all of you circle makers, let's continue to create wider and wider circles together.
All right, it might take a second. Some of you may have seen it before. Some of you, most of you, it's probably your first time watching it. And every time I hear something different. So let's just take a few seconds to collect your thoughts, and then feel free to unmute yourself. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just unmute and share a word, a phrase, an observation, a next step, and or drop it in the chat.
Great. So everyone's just sharing a comment, a thought, a word, a phrase, a next step, a question. Good. Oh, good. Yes.
Julie, I don't know that we have their dashboard as a prompt. Let's go there next, just because there's so much sharing.
Perfect. Keep it going. And Christy, go ahead and share your screen and I'll explain where we're headed.
Okay.
And so today is called Circles from the Start because we think you all are the most magical circle makers that exist. If you are a human being who works with small children, who has small children, we care the most about getting families and kids involved in circles from the very, very beginning and actually erasing a lot of lines and moving beyond thinking about lines in such significant ways. what Christy is doing now is sharing your dashboard. We've put together a dashboard and we can't even wait to show it to you, because right here is going to be about a year's worth of learning. Maybe not, maybe a few weeks worth of learning, but it's kind of amazing. So you'll know you're here. Christy just put in the chat how to get here, and the password is inclusion. You'll know you're here when you see our faces and a little bit about us. And then below that, May 11th resources. That is a clickable toggle. Now just know this, if you just want to watch right now and not jump in, that's okay too. But we've got the definition of inclusion we're going to be talking about. We have it in Spanish. We have a checklist of supplemental supports and services. We have all these things that are openable. It's probably not the right word. And I'm just going to start with Christy. You pick any one that you want to show how it opens.
Okay. So like, for example, I'll show this one. Anything that is in blue or in parentheses is a hyperlink. So we have an article about how to support students with behaviors that are challenging. So you can click on the link and go straight to the article that's published through ASCD. You can also click on the PDF and it will open up as a new window as a PDF file. Okay, so anything that's in the parentheses, if it's a video, this is our colleague Otto Lana, who is a person with autism, and he helps us with our presentations. Often will co-teach with us, or he will create content. So for example, he created this video that's a bit about his experience and his advice, but there's videos, podcasts, blogs, and mostly PDFs. And the reason I'm highlighting the PDF is because we're going to talk about the definition of inclusion next. And some of you posted a yeah, but already, like love inclusion, all for inclusion, but you can't just throw, I'm going to paraphrase, you can't just throw kids in and expect it to work. Totally. And we're going to talk about what does the system have to do to ensure that inclusion is effective and supportive and just right for each and every student. And so these are handouts that you all can share. You don't need more permission. You can print them, give them out, print them on waterproof paper so you have them forever, whatever you want. So again, one dashboard, I'll put the link again, and you have this access to this forever. The password is the same for everyone. It's the word inclusion. And when you get here, if you're on your phone or a Chromebook, you might have to scroll quite a bit to find this orange toggle. You click on it, it pops open, and then anything that is in brackets or in a blue will tell you, that's a link to something more. And you can share any or all of these things with others. And then if there are things that we share live that aren't on your dashboard, I'll add them either in real time or shortly after our time together. So for example, a couple people said, where's your books? I'll put that link. And then lastly, some of you were like, hey, I want to share that video. I didn't grab the link. The video series is actually 3 parts. The Circle Makers is the one you just watched. Because of Oliver, and I think there's been a mistake. These are the 3 for PBS, and you can watch them, share them, give them out, and then you can also download the ebook of the Circle Makers. It's like a PDF, but you can read it on your phone or read it on your Google, your Chromebook, or you can share it with others as well. Okay?
That's
Anything
it.
else, Julie?
No, so that's the dashboard. We'd love comments or questions about the dashboard only right now. So go ahead and just, do you have any comments, thoughts, worries? You can even say like, what was the link again? You can say anything at all. It's all good. But we're just going to see, and compliments, you can be like, this is so exciting. Yeah, Jennifer, that's what I was looking for. So it is super helpful. And we put a lot of thought. Yes, Bobby, you may share the information with families. Yes, Tracy, good. Good. Yes, yes, yes. Love this. Share with families. Absolutely. So just know that you can do that. And Christy, can they share the whole dashboard with families, or can they share pieces and parts, or does it matter?
I don't think it matters to us. I think that might be a CISA 1 or this conference, because if we're going to put the recording here, it's up to you all how much you want the recording to be shared with others. But yeah, for us, any of those resources can be shared as much as you see fit.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll put one more link and I'll add this. Many of you are family advocates, and many of you have dual roles, and many of you are thinking of sharing this with families. Julie and I have another dashboard. I got to find the link, Julie, that's our kind of compilation of resources for families. So I'll put that in the chat and I'll put it on your dashboard as well. That's just on our website. You could just share it at any time. This one is really kind of specific to the topics we'll be exploring today. But that one's a little bit broader for families in general. Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
and
yes.
thanks, Michelle. If there's anything that doesn't look like it's working, let me know and I'll get it fixed either in real time or shortly after. Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. So thank you for letting us know. What it means to be a circle maker is the work that we do all day, every day. Help to create wider and wider circles, help to rethink some of the lines we've created, because we have studied, each of us for 25 plus years, the benefits of quality inclusive education. And so I'm going to do this part as a read aloud. Christy, I bet you're fixing links, so I'll do this part as a read aloud. Yep. And for the read aloud, I'm just going to read these 2 paragraphs. And here's what I'd like you to do is jot any words into the chat in real time as you want, that you like. So here it is again. Jot in the chat words that strike you as I read aloud. Okay? So your job is just to sit back and listen and jot any words that strike you. Here we go. Inclusive education means we no longer accept that separate classrooms, separate schools, and separate lives are in the best interest of any student. Separating people by ability disadvantages everyone. Belonging is a human need. Our educational system, practices, and spaces need to be reimagined. Inclusive education means every student is valued because of their strengths, gifts, and even challenges. As disability is simply diversity. Everyone benefits from meaningful participation and opportunities to learn grade level content with diverse peers. We must trust that all students come to us as incredible, whole people who do not need to be fixed. Now I'm going to scroll and see what struck you. Ah, beautiful.
And Julie, I'll put the definition link in the chat as well. So if anyone feels like they need to see it in their own way or in their own size, blow it up. I should have reminded folks too that you can turn the closed captioning on for today's session. And if you feel that it's easier for you to see this definition, especially the next slide, go ahead and grab the handout out of the chat or off your dashboard. And then Julie, what kind of themes are you seeing from what folks are resonating with?
I think just these words like valuing diversity, meaningful participation, whole people not needing to be fixed. Yeah. The concept of disability not being deficit, but being diversity, I think is really striking a lot of folks here, or is really resonating probably with folks here. Now, Christy and I are going to share with you the next part of the definition. And it is really all the parts and pieces that are needed to create inclusive education. So we recognize this is a text-heavy slide. And first, we're going to give you a full minute to read with your eyes if you like to do that. So a minute of silence to just read all the pieces and parts needed for inclusive education. When you're finished reading, we're going to ask which ones really strike you today. Okay. Lots of people are sharing, and if you're still reading, that's okay. You can always mute us. And what we're going to do is highlight one today that feels important to us. Christy, do you want to start? Which one feels important to you today?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask James to co-teach with me if you feel up to it, James. And you can either do it in the chat or unmute yourself. If you scroll back and James was sharing an experience growing up and with inclusion or exclusion, however you want to call it. And so it made me think of number 3 a lot, because what often happens is words get bad names like inclusion or critical race theory or ABA, right? You can pick any label, any word, any trend, any goal, and there's going to create camps, people who have had good experiences with it, bad experiences with it, harmful experiences with it, elevating experiences, but oftentimes the it is really complicated. So why Julie and I have this really complicated slide is to show that inclusion is very complicated, and we have to eliminate barriers to student success. It's not just about physical placement. It's not about access only, but it's really, look at all 3 of those: students' access, participation, and learning by abandoning inequitable practices, policies, and procedures. And James, I would say I could edit this and say harmful practices. Maybe we were a little light in saying inequitable, which really leads to harm. So if you wanted to say anything or comment, yeah.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to be one of those, angry autistic self-advocates either. I do show critical feelings, but that's because I've had some experiences that were negative. And one of the experiences that really kind of I'm reminded of was when I was in high school. There was an inclusion war that broke out between my peers and the teachers and the other professionals in my school, in that I was socially taken in high school by a group of very kind, mature female peers. And these female peers were like, look, you're our friend. You're one of us. We accept you. The problem, though, was that as our friendships blossomed, it became clear that there were these social rules that socially were expecting me to be excluded from my friends because they were female and I was male, and that there were all these rules society was saying that they had to exclude me because of our gender differences. And my female peers decided to rebel against those rules of exclusion and decided they were going to fight to include me in places that society said were girl only. And the people who opposed our fight the most were the teachers, were the professionals who declared what we were doing was inappropriate. And we just saw them as hypocrites because they believed in inclusive education, yet they were fighting to stop this peer-driven inclusion in which mature females were fighting for their autistic male friends to be fully included in their friendships.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Really good example.
Here's an example that has struck anger in so many people.
Yeah.
These female peers were so radical. They were fighting to include me in their sleepovers. And so many people think that's wrong. Shame on you. Unjust rebellion. But to them, it was just as much inclusion as we're talking about today. And ironically, we did not engage in any of the vices or drugs or alcohol that our typical peers who were supposedly socially better than us did.
Right. And Julie, where does that lead you? I can hear your brain from here.
Yeah, thank you. So I mean, I want all of us to think about gender norms and how all of these ideas play out in real ways in the hearts and minds of our students. And we have to think about how we do all these parts and pieces beautifully so that we can create circles from the start and it doesn't become divisive and it doesn't become an issue. Okay, this is my son, Sam. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about Sam, and it kind of connects to James's story too.
I thought so too.
Yeah, because students know how to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Kids know how to do inclusion. It's the adults that really struggle. So I'm going to tell you a story about my son, Sam. He's visually impaired. He sees about 2200. He's legally blind. And one day he comes to me after school, 2nd grade, and he says, Mom, I can't find my friends on the playground. And so I'm stuck hanging out with the educational assistant, the paraprofessionals. And they're nice and everything, but they just don't want to play the games I want to play, right? And I was like, absolutely. And I said, Sam, this is what I do for a living. I kind of flipped my hair. I was like, Sam, I solve problems about inclusion. Let me do this with you. And he's like, oh, no, please don't. Please, no. Put away your markers and chart paper. Stop. So the next day I get a phone call from his teacher, Mrs. Procopio. And she calls me and says, well, Sam came into class. And Sam did the funniest thing. He walks in and goes, Mrs. Procopio, can I have 5 minutes on the morning meeting agenda because I want to discuss some issues of inequity on the playgrounds. And so first question for you all, I want you all to answer in the chat is, what comes to mind about Mrs. Procopio when you know that the story started this way? What are you already noticing about her? Yes, Jennifer. She's open to student input.
Yeah.
She has a morning meeting.
Way to say it, Katie.
Yeah, communication. She calls parents, like, right? All of it. So good. Kids have a voice. Kids are heard.
She calls parents about good things. Sorry.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So she finishes the story and she goes, Julie, you won't even believe how it went, but it went like this. He brought all the kids together for morning meeting. They sat down and he said, first things first, I can't find you at recess. I can't see you. And you're always changing your hats and jackets and I don't know where you are. Well, the kids were like, no problem. They started to brainstorm. And then Sam looks at Mrs. Procopio and goes, can you scribe? They're going to have a lot of ideas. She's like, yes. So she starts to scribe, right? And the first thing they say is we need those glow in the dark hats that people wear that runners wear called day glow hats. If we all had those hats, Sam would know who was in our class and where he could get support. Day glow hats. Second idea, we need those pennies from gym class that could go over our jackets and then he could find us. Great, pennies from gym class. Next idea, we need walkie-talkies. Walkie-talkies. Now, given that, I shared 3 of the ideas. I guess there were hundreds, but 3 of the ideas. Anyone want to guess when they voted, which of those 3 ideas won in a landslide victory for 2nd graders? What do you think was the winning answer? Oh, yes, Jennifer. Walkie-talkies. Walkie-talkies, walkie-talkies. Yes. Okay, these people know small children. Walkie-talkies, landslide victory. So I'm like, I wonder what that's going to look like. And she says, I don't know, but they asked me if I had a class list because they wanted all the kids in the room in order. And Tracy, the teacher, said, yes, I have a class list. Of course, you can use it. And then I'm visiting probably 2 weeks later. And I haven't heard much about how it's going from Sam or anyone else. And if you have a kid with a visual impairment, you can spy on them because they don't notice you. So I'm watching him and he is standing by himself on the playground. And I was like, I knew he should have brainstormed with me. 2nd graders don't know anything. And I'm watching and I'm watching. And then all of a sudden I see him take his walkie-talkie out of his pocket and go, I'm looking for Baden, over and out. Shh. And then I hear, Baden's been located. He's on the slide, good buddy, 10-4. Okay. And Sam knows where the slide is. Sam goes to the slide, finds Baden, and they play. And I was like, oh, kids know how to do this. I would have made something laminated. It would have had board maker picture symbols or some nonsense on it, and it would have been considered a support for him. But the answer was he just needed a walkie-talkie, willing friends, and some really good ideas that came from friends.
Well,
So
I think what's really interesting, one part of the story that we don't always talk much about is that even way back at the beginning when Sam shared the issue, no one said, well, is being able to locate your friends on the playground your IEP goal? Because, you know, we have to work on your IEP goals. And no one said, well, you know, how bad is your vision? And maybe we should get a consult in. Let's get the vision specialist in and let's find out what the, you know, like, our typical, or often our typical hat is to look at the deficits. How bad is your vision? Well, what things can you see a little bit more of, instead of just like, they just like, oh, let's just go for what your strengths are.
Right. No one said how many standard deviations below the normacy on this visual acuity test. And all they did was go, I know Sam's strengths, which are hearing. He can hear really well. So let's use those strengths and let's give that as an access point, right? Yes, we get stuck on the wrong things. We focus on deficits and we hyper focus on deficits instead of what are our strengths, what are our access points, how do we go? And also, Christy, they didn't make a plan that took a long time.
Right.
They started the next day. Mrs. Procopio luckily had walkie-talkies at home, which I think is bizarre. But she did, and they were even charged up. So it was like no problem at all.
Yeah, they didn't need professional development. You know, some of the easiest things can be rather straightforward. So speaking of straightforward, Julie, where do you want to go from here, given the time and where we are? What are you thinking?
I think we will show access points for all as our next step, because we've mentioned access points, and we're going to give you an example. And the beauty of this example is it's a Wisconsin example. There's a little kid in this video, and he has autism as an attribute, and they're trying to include him in a class, and he doesn't use verbal language. You'll see a lot of barriers that exist for him. And all I want you to do is study this animated video for what did they do to support him during this lesson. It's called Because of Oliver. It's the second in the PBS. It's on your dashboard, you have it. And your job is to examine and jot down all the things the teachers did to make it successful for Oliver.
And I think, so Julie said that a couple of different ways. What did the teachers do to make the lesson successful for all the students? That's one way to think about it. It could be, what did the teachers do to remove barriers to participation, to learning, to engagement? And then how does this phrase access points, how is it defined? How does it show up? What are some examples of access points? Those are all the same in a way, but each one of them might help you a little bit differently, okay? So it's another short animated video. We'll watch it together and then we'll talk about what it means to create access points.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Costin, and today I'm answering the question, what does inclusive education look like? In a story called Because of Oliver. Here is Oliver. He loves being at school with his friends. He is very, very busy. He likes to walk while he learns, and sometimes he hums. Sitting is not his favorite activity, and he really enjoys bouncing. He is fascinated by both insects and trains. He used to be in a room for students who had similar characteristics. His particular room was labeled Autism. When he was in that labeled room, it made the hard parts even harder. It was harder to talk with students who struggled to talk. It was harder to make friends with others who struggled to make friends. He could not learn from and make friends with other students in other rooms. And worse yet, students could not learn from and make friends with him. But now Oliver is in a second grade inclusive classroom with 32 students, where lines are not drawn between students. In this classroom, every person is valued for the ways they are different and alike. Oliver's class has 2 teachers, Miss Olaya and Miss Maisel. As you already know, teachers are some of the most creative sort of people. This story is about what happens when these 2 teachers change a lesson, all because of Oliver. This lesson was about parts of a story. The students would learn about character, setting, and plot. The teachers had some plans. They would have the students sit crisscross applesauce on the floor, and Miss Maisel would read a book about a monster under a bed, and Miss Olaya would act out some of the very best parts. Students would raise their hand and answer the questions, and write with a pencil about the plot. They then would each draw the monster from the book. It was going to be a good lesson, but as Oliver's teachers thought about their plan, they realized this lesson might not work for someone who does not like to sit, or can't raise his hand, or answer questions, and does not write with a pencil. Luckily, Oliver's teachers both know about the creative magic of inclusion. They believe when they plan a lesson for their class, they are planning for everyone in their class. So the teachers got together and changed the lesson because of Oliver. They first wrote a list and crossed out what Oliver can't do, and circled what he can do. They took the negative list that came with Oliver, crossed out the negative words, and circled the positive words. From Oliver can't sit to Oliver loves to move. He does not talk to he can point, draw, and smile to communicate. He won't sit still to he works best when standing and bouncing. He does not write to is starting to type on a keyboard. He has trouble starting a task to starts a task with the help of a friend. Focused on trains to is an expert on trains. Obsessed by insects to is an insect scholar. Starting with these circles, the teachers have created access points. Access points are just a student's best way of learning. Now these teachers have almost everything they need to plan their inclusive lesson. Next, they had to change the rules of the lesson. From students must sit crisscross applesauce to students can stand or bounce to listen. Students must raise hands to answer questions to students can point to an answer, tell a friend, or draw their answer. From a student must write with a pencil to students can write with a pencil, a crayon, a marker, or even type. From students must draw the monster in the book to students can create their very own monster using their favorite things. From students must do things independently to every student can get help from their friends. Let's watch this new lesson in action. When the monster lesson began, Oliver chose to stand just to the side of the teacher. It turns out some students sat on the floor, one sat on a ball and bounced, and several students stood near the back of the rug. Oliver stood and watched as Miss Maisel read the story and Miss Olaya acted out the very best parts. Next, it was time for questions. The teacher asked who were the characters in the story. Most students turned to a friend and said their answer. 3 students drew their answer, and 1 student pointed to an answer and smiled. 2 students needed a reminder not to roll on the carpet, and 1 student needed a reminder not to interrupt. Next, it was time to write the plot. Petra chose a bright green marker, her favorite color. Oliver and Sam both typed their answers in their very favorite fonts. Chloe used a fresh orange crayon because she loves the smell of new crayons. And Stanley B was the only one who chose to use a pencil, a sharpened number 2 pencil. When the students learned that they could create their own monster, they cheered with delight. However, Oliver did not like the loud noise of the cheering. He covered his ears and began to cry. Trayvon put his hand on Oliver's back and grabbed his noise-blocking headphones and handed them to him. He told Oliver it would be okay. Oliver slowly uncovered his ears and put on his headphones and stopped crying. Oliver did not start making his monster at first, but Aiden reminded him to get started. It turns out Chloe and Daniel both needed reminders from their friends too. Stanley helped Rosie when her glue stick broke. Oliver helped Ellie. He typed the box when Ellie asked him where the glitter was. Oliver bounced and hummed loudly as he worked. Chloe asked him to hum quieter, and he did. Everyone got to use materials from the art table to create their own monster. Rosie's had a baseball bat, arms and legs. Douglas's was pink and wore a superhero cape. Ruthie's looked quite a bit like her new puppy. And Oliver's had, you guessed it, 6 insect legs, a real train body, and a set of feathery antennae. The old lesson was good, but this new lesson turned out to be better, much better. Better for Rosie, Trayvon, Petra, both Stanleys, Sam, Daniel, Ami, Chloe, better for everyone. And this new lesson was much better for Oliver. It turns out this lesson, this class, and this school are all so much better because of Oliver.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Thanks, friends. So you got to see this video, and we like to put it here because there are tons of strategies built into this video. Did anyone notice an access point that was created for Oliver? So you can think of any access points that were created. And I love the love. Thanks, everybody. I'm glad you love it too. Stand during story time. He could move. Different motor tools. Typing, seating, making your own monster. Computer. Jennifer brings up showing learning in different ways. Options. Haha, Kathy. Kathy was like, wait, first they had to look at all the negative list. And I said that in a really specific way. It's because often read an IEP of a kid with any label, and you're going to have all sorts of words that are deficits or challenges. And what I think is, of course, they exist. And we have to reframe them into positive strengths and access points so that we know how to reach and teach them. Yes.
Yeah, I think all too often people get on, again, one of those labels of we're going to be strength-based, or we're going to write strength-based IEPs, or we're going to build upon a student's strengths. And then we look at each other like, well, what are their strengths? What they got, you know? And one of the best reframes that I saw was a kid who had the label of cerebral palsy and would often have toys or materials on his wheelchair tray. And one of the professionals at the IEP meeting was like, they can't do much at all. And they just like knock all the things off their tray or drop them all or throw them. And another team member said, great, they can reach, grasp, and release. And I was like, what a beautiful way to reframe a kid who's always throwing objects or seems to be always dropping or pushing or shoving. It's like, wait, they can reach, grasp, and release. Let's build upon that interest, that skill, that motor movement. So it's just a reframe versus ignoring. It kind of back to Julie's story about Sam. It's not that we go, oh, he can see. Yeah, let's ignore that ability or disability. No, we just don't see the disability as a negative. Not being able to see doesn't have to be a deficit. It doesn't have to be something that we go, oh, that's too bad. We go, let's build upon it. Let's take him from where he is.
Yeah. I've never heard the phrase, somebody named Eva said talent scout. Be a talent scout, not a deficit detective. I love it, love it, love it.
Yeah,
I've never heard
good
that.
Stuff.
All of that is critical. And when people say, how do you do it? It looks like that. You start from the very lesson design itself, and you change some rules. We'll just talk about seating for a moment because people brought it up. When you're talking about early childhood and you're expecting all children to be seated crisscross applesauce in the same exact way, what you're doing is causing a barrier. Instead of saying you have 3 ways of being, we could do stadium seating. So if you want to see the book real close and want to sit on your bottom, that's front row. Next row, you can kneel. Third row out, you can stand. Fourth row, you can move. Stadium seating, it's called. All of a sudden, humans get to go, what does my body need right now? And none of it is wrong. All of it is okay. And now if you're a student who needs to move, likes to move, wants to move, has to move, you have an access point and you're not different than everyone else.
And what's really good about that example is that, you know, think of it like a continuum. If you say everyone has to sit on their spot, so it's an assigned spot, you have to sit a particular way in a particular distance, your hands have to be in a particular space, your mouth has to be quiet, you can't be poking your friends. This is a lot of stuff and it creates a lot of stressors, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But if I say to you, well, guess what, folks? Circle time or morning meeting or this activity could be a choice for students. That might feel too radical. Folks might be like, wait, it's not a choice. We have to do this activity, or we have to do this lesson, or we have to learn how to participate in social interactions and in groups. Then you start to peel it back and say, okay, where can I find some choice? So it's that both I can invite and encourage and support students to come to the activity, and I can individualize it so that students have access and want to be there. Knowing that some days, no matter what I do, somebody's going to find that what they were doing previously was still more engaging or created more curiosity. And I have to look at that and say, what is my goal? My goal is to spark neurons to fire together so they wire together. So here's a kid who's engaged deeply in block play, learning a ton of things. And I'm like, how do I get them to successfully transition to come and learn with me? Wait, why do I need to transition? Do you see? So it starts to allow you to become even more and more creative with choice. But if you can start with, okay, one of the rules for everyone is to sit crisscross applesauce, and I can create access points just with that, now we have an in. Any thoughts, questions, reactions to choice is the friend of inclusion? Especially when you hear yeah, buts. Yeah, but they can't do that in kindergarten. Yeah, but their IEP says. Yeah, but they need to. Take that and then let's be that talent scout and that detective and go, where can I find some choice, even when there doesn't feel like there can be a choice? One time, I'll just finish the stadium seating. One time people misunderstood us and they thought that when we said stadium seating, all the kids had to have chairs. So just want to make sure that you caught what Julie described as stadium seating. It was using the idea of tiers or levels or ways to be able to see the stage from different vantage points. That's why we call it stadium seating, not that everybody has to have a seat. All right.
Right. I'm going to ask if you've noticed any access points that you've used today. So first question, just put yes or no in the chat. Has anyone noticed that when Christy is talking, I'm typing in the chat, and when I'm talking, Christy's typing in the chat? Have you noticed that? Put yes or no, first of all. That's my first question for you. Do we have any yeses? Oh, lots of them. Lots. Okay. And my next question is, did it help you at any point today? Okay. That's just a simple access point, meaning we just put a visual support next to auditory. So whenever Christy was saying something really good, I was like, let me grab it. Let me put it here so you can see it and it can hold still in case auditory processing is not your jam. That's just simply adding an access point. And we're going to show you a handout called 100 Ways to Adapt Anything. And it's really how to put 100 different kinds of supports. Oh, Christy, you said something else.
You're fine, Julie.
Okay. we're going to share with you 100 supports that can be used all the time. So Christy, can you share your screen and grab it?
Yep, for sure. And
Okay.
so what's fun about this, our friend Shelley Moore sometimes calls an adaptation an anticipation. So you might anticipate some friend at circle time may need support. Even if you give a stadium seating options, there may be some kids who are going to need some sort of on the fly support. So how do we anticipate the need for support? So Julie and I can, as co-teachers, design a lesson just like the teachers in the Oliver story. Yet in the moment, did you notice that peers were supporting each other in real time? They had to support a student that got overstimulated, support students who didn't remember, support students who couldn't find something. You might not be able to anticipate all of those. So we give you 100 ways to think about how can you provide on the fly or real-time supports that are unpredictable in the sense of you won't always know that somebody's going to need it. And let's start off, Julie, with a little bit of clarification of lingo. I threw another A in with anticipating, but yeah.
Yeah, so, a lot of people say, wait, is that an adaptation, a modification, an accommodation? And we just provide those definitions for you there. And then after they're provided, we ask you for this handout to forget them.
Yeah.
Essentially, just forget them. Meaning, these are all kinds of supports and they can be different things at different times. So how we do that is if you see the headings, we have 10 headings. So we've got environmental supports. Something like seat next to a preferred peer. We have peer supports, all the ways that peers can provide really, really lovely supports. Pacing supports. Even today, we have used some different pacing supports. By asking people to either do a task while it's going on or after. Some people like to multitask, some don't.
Right.
Equipment supports. You all know about equipment supports that might be needed, but just really rethinking who has access to them and how we can make sure all kids have access to them. How we present material.
Hey, Julie, let's go back to equipment supports just for a minute. Let's, do you have your reader window things?
Yeah.
So, when Julie said very quickly what materials you have and who has access to them, sometimes we think, oh, this has to go with a kid with a label or an IEP or whatever. Julie's going to describe how she might use these in a lesson for anyone. So describe what they are, Julie, and how you've used them.
Yeah, I can't think of the name. Reader strips, I guess they're called. But essentially, you've probably used them for a million years. They're different sizes, different shapes. But I will just use as an example, Adam, who's a high school student, who would explain to me that if he used a reader strip, the words didn't move around any longer. And I'm like, what? He goes, you know how the words jump around on the page? And I'm like, I do not. And he said, but when I put a green reader strip on it, whoo, it's great. Well, and so again, we don't want to just give Adam this accommodation or support. Instead, we want to make sure everybody has it. So these high school students, I bought them at the dollar store, and this one is for therightstuff.com and all sorts of places. But anyway, those high school students, all of them, it was an AP high school class, wanted different colors at different times. They would use them as bookmarks. They'd use them in all sorts of ways. They said it made their eyes relax, etc. So you probably know this, but anytime you're going to provide a support to a student who has a label, you're going to want to think about how do I make that support more available for more people? And that's the example.
And does that make sense? That too often we highlight a particular thing like a visual schedule going with a particular label of autism, when maybe not every student with autism needs a visual schedule and not every student without a label might benefit from one. I got too many negatives, but you get the idea. And it's just to open it up as a choice. If anyone needs a reader window, come up and get it. If anybody wants one, kind of go to hand in hand often. And just thinking about that they don't become stigmatizing, they're not crutches, they're not things that are lowering standards, they're not things that are making it inequitable. There's all kinds of ways to start to say that these supports are built into the system, so whoever needs them on this day can choose to use them or have them at the ready.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm just showing my screen quickly just to show you that there's a bunch more supports. And some of you, these won't be new to you. You'll be like, yep, we use them, we like them, we don't use them. That's great. But this is a really nice handout to give to people to make sure that they understand that there are so many ways to support all of our learners all the time, academically, socially, etc. And we don't have to remove and remediate. We can do things inclusively. And lastly, I want to point out on this handout that human supports are the very last piece because we think that should be the last choice, last option is anything that looks like stop-in support. Very, very rarely side-by-side support. And so really looking at human supports as a last choice. And then at the very end, we ask people after you decide the support, does the student like it? Do they choose it? How long should we support in this way? And when and how should we fade those supports? Now, if it's a communication support, we often don't want to fade those supports, but it could be a different kind of support where fading is needed or preferred, or the student wants to become independent with that task. So, all right.
So Jody, that's kind of a bigger question. If we have time, let's come back to it. The easy answer, Jody was just asking like, well, when might you need to get support from an expert like an occupational therapist, speech therapist, behavior specialist, and or parental consent? There's kind of workarounds in the sense that you can talk to families and in general about the supports that are provided classroom wide and let everyone know that these will be available, and making sure, just like you would with food allergies, that there's no issues or concerns. And then certainly work closely with your related service folks so that they're used correctly or they're used in the way that are most supportive for students. So you're right, Jody, it may take a conversation, but I would say have that as a community. Say, this is what I'd like to do. What do people think about that? Anybody have concerns? What do we need to know? What do we need to do training? What do we need to do to teach students? All of that. So yeah.
Okay, so Christy and I have 15 minutes left with you. And so we're going to do 15 minutes of behavior because we don't want to not talk about behavior, because we very well know that it's the, I'm just going to put behavior in quotes, the challenging behavior that we often see that causes people to not be able to include students with disabilities, and specifically those with autism. And so I'm going to do a 2-minute hand model. Sound good, Christy?
Yep.
Okay. The hand model of the brain. You are invited to join me if you'd like. It's nice to do a bodily kinesthetic activity right now, which is this. Take your hand, tuck your thumb under, put your fingers over the top. And if you turn sideways, this is the shape of the human brain. And our job when we're working with any student with any type of neurodiversity is to help students be in their prefrontal cortex more and more of the time. The prefrontal cortex is the place where all good learning and development occurs. It's where, Christy, you name everybody, name in the chat what occurs in the prefrontal cortex. Thinking. Good, keep it going. Higher level thinking, conscious thinking, yes. Executive functioning, planning, problem solving, decision making. This group is awesome. Yes, 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 yes. That is what happens in the prefrontal cortex. As you well know, all humans often flip their lids and end up going into fight, flight, freeze, or faint down here in the brain stem, the base of the skull. When we're down here and we're not in our prefrontal cortex any longer, it means that we are in fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And our behaviors will look like that. I want you, whether you're neurodiverse or not, to think of a time when you lost your mind, when you behaved in a way, even as an adult, that you weren't proud of. Take 1 minute and put it in the chat. Like, for example, when I walk into my daughter's room and there are dishes in her bedroom, that flips my lid. Traffic flips my lid. Go ahead and share with me what sends you straight over the edge sometimes. My partner says to breathe. Snow in April. I couldn't stop crying.
Hate
When
getting
someone,
on demand. Ugh.
yeah, if you want to piss off Christy, say breathe, Christy. She's like, she'll hold her breath.
I will.
Flutter, Meg. Yes, Meg. Negativity. Right, right. Cars speeding through your neighborhood. I took my 17-year-old daughter example. That's right. Dirty dishes. Science project. Yes. Yes. So we've got all these things that flip people's lids. And now we're making light of some of these. Some of these are big, some of them are little. But Christy, lids don't flip once after one thing happens. They flip after tons and tons and tons and tons of stressors, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain that better?
So what happens in this triune brain, okay, you have this prefrontal cortex, the limbic regions, and then your brainstem. All of them are working together. So stimuli comes in through the brainstem and tries to make its way up to this prefrontal cortex area that can process it and go, it's not a problem. It's okay that someone said breathe. But sometimes it gets stuck along the way. So what Julie was saying is that, like, sometimes there can be a big thing like traffic, you didn't even notice it, but like all of a sudden the dishes just made you go, what? But what really was happening underneath the surface was all day long, Julie was getting agitated. Maybe her pants were the wrong pants that day. Maybe the lighting was bright. Maybe she ate something funny 2 days ago and her body was still trying to process it. Maybe the TV was on. Like, all of these things are happening below the threshold of our awareness, and they're taking their toll on our system. And at some point, the brain is like, I've had too much. I don't feel safe. I don't feel settled anymore. Now, you might get lucky. It might just kind of flip and you might have a big emotion, like you might just say, please put that stuff away. It wasn't too bad. It was just a little bit more emphasis than you meant. Or you go all the way down into your brainstem, depending on how many hits your system has taken, not just today, but even from an epigenetics perspective. So if you have generational poverty, generational trauma, those mean that you will have a harder time keeping your system with the lid on. And when I say, I don't mean you have a conscious control over keeping your lid on, but what Julie's saying is that even if my lid flips, it's not always tied to just the immediate thing, seeing the dishes in my daughter's bedroom. It's one of the things, but it's the culmination of stressors that actually has lids flipping and going back on.
Yes, I love that. And so you can think about epigenetics. You can think about what happened this morning, last week. And it is one of the challenges in looking for a reason for the behavior, right? When you're always looking for what's the antecedent of that behavior as if it's visible, it's often so much more than that. So if you have autism, for example, you're going to have all these same exact experiences, and sometimes they're heightened. So sometimes the stressors can take much more of a toll on the system. And so what we end up seeing is kids in fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And our job is to put lids back on, put lids back on, put lids back on. And if you work with small children, Christy, how often are you putting lids back on?
All day. So this
All day,
is about regulating. This is about being able to stay in this zone of optimal learning. And so when the body experiences things, let's just do something like a food. How many of you love things that are very spicy? Just go ahead and put in the chat if you love things that are spicy. Doesn't negatively impact your stomach. It makes you happy. You'll see it's all over the board. Like some folks are going to be like, it depends. What do you mean spicy? Do you mean spicy number 6 or spicy number 4? So all of us process stimuli like the taste of, because taste is developmental and is personal. What it does to each person's body is different. How it feels on the tongue, how it feels in the throat, and then how it's processed by the body. All of us are different. So some of us, it might hyper arouse us and it might put us in a red zone. And Julie's going to show you what behaviors you'll get. Others, it might cause a blue zone. Others, it's just right. So we kind of sometimes call this Goldilocks. Is it just right? So the ready state is when the taste, the spicy level is just right for you. But if I take any 5 of you, you will not agree upon what is just right because it's internal to your system. And so every input, every sensory input from a direction to spices is regulated or received differently by every human. And some things will cause us to go into fight or flight or freeze or faint. And Julie's going to talk to you about what you'll see as a result of that happening inside the body.
I'm going to ask people, I'm going to slow my rate of speech down, and I'm going to slow my volume down. And I'm going to ask you what happened to your body. What do you notice? Just by
breathe.
being, yeah. Good. Jen leaned in. Nikki's breathing slowed. Carrie's like, wait, what? Linda's body quieted. Yeah. What you don't even realize as adult humans is even auditory input, visual input, physiological input, all day, every day is taking a toll. And you're working hard. Oh, let's keep that lid on. Let's keep it on. Let's keep, oh, you've been working hard, right? And just notice one tiny thing. As an instructor from a different state, I'm in New York, you're not. I was able to regulate, co-regulate with you.
Right.
So you are a magic human being in the presence of children, in what your body is like, in what your tone is like, in what your volume is like. And so just remember, if you see your job as a lid putter oner, if you're a parent, this is what you do all day. And we're going to give you a few magic beans in the last 4 minutes together that are the antidote to fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And they are helping a human be safe, seen, soothed, and secure.
And we offer these as we close up today because we're talking about creating access points, removing barriers. You can notice James' comment as well. When we create requirements, rules, systems that cause humans to go into the red or the blue, we're actually pushing them out of the zone of optimal learning. We're pushing them outside their ability to learn and develop. And our job as educators, as advocates, no matter what our own role or title might be, is to really increase the time that humans spend in the zone of optimal learning. So these 4 S's, we're going to go pretty quickly. You'll have a full handout that describes each of them, and strategies are on your dashboard for each. So I'm going to let Julie pick the one she wants to do to give you an example, but just know that this is sort of some of the magic of creating access points for all students, not just about behaviors that are challenging.
Yeah, thank you, Christy, for just saying this is actually the magic for all kids, and it's kind of doubly magic for kids with autism, or you might need to do more and more and more of this. And so what we have is a slide on each, and I'm not going to be able to read it all, but you have a handout. I'm just going to talk about safety.
Okay.
And even today, Christy, maybe you'll notice that we've done a few things to help with safety, helping you be comfortable with what's going on, giving you what we think are clear directions with clear visuals, with clear supports. We try. Sometimes we've done better than others, but just individual choice. If I know I can stand or sit, if I know it's appropriate to do this or that, I have 2 choices or 3 choices, my system, my lid goes back on a little bit, okay? Another idea, and we're gonna just fly past these. If you're taking screenshots, that's fine. We're gonna have our PowerPoints for you, so they're gonna be right on the dashboard. So I don't need to go too slow, but just even learning ways choices, ways that your body can be positioned, output choices, right? Movement choices. What it means to be seen. Just think about that, what it means for a student to be seen. And one of them is to slow down and avoid rushing to fix things. Christy has taught me this one, and I think it's magic. Picture that a kid has skinned their knee. In fact, it happened in Target. A kid fell and skinned their knee, and their mom said, "It's okay, you're okay, you're okay, look at me, breathe, look at me, look at me, look at me." And she had the best intentions in the world, but what might work better is, ouch. Ooh, I see that. Oh, do you see the difference? If we're rushing to stuff the emotion, we're not seeing that the kid is hurt. So that's a quick example of what it means to be seen. And there's so much more to unpack here. And then what soothed means is to reduce stressors. So recognize and reduce stressors for folks. Thinking about all the stressors that could be reduced in the biological domain, in the emotional domain, in the cognitive domain, and in the social domain. A lot of the strategies we've talked about today have reduced cognitive stressors. So letting people write or draw. Now I have an option. Tell it, say it, or write it, right? All those kinds of options help with that cognitive domain. And we have, I don't know, years of training on this. So if you ever want more, just know that we've got all sorts of stuff for you.
And Julie, maybe what I'll do is just share, because some folks came on and off, maybe we'll share the dashboard one more time and show them where you're getting all of these. And then you can wrap us up with our exit ticket. Okay?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Okay. So if you're like, wait, I can't get all those fast enough, couple of things. Everything is on our dashboard. You might have to check a little bit, click and search, because we may not have labeled them great, but you have these forever. And as Julie said, I'll put our PowerPoint on there later today as well. So if the screenshot was easier, but you'll come to the dashboard, click here, and then right where we were is this notion of ready brains, the 3 states: reactive, hyper-aroused, hypo, just right. The stressors that Julie was just talking about, the ways to reduce the stressors, how to avoid fixing, the 4 S's, and then she was just landing on how do we offer lifelines. So there's this whole little section here that you can unpack with even more down here that you will hear from Brianna Dixon, from Autolana, and others that are more specific to autism, that are taking these concepts and applying it and sharing their experiences. Okay, but you'll find Dan Siegel's work is there. That was the hand model of the brain. But just come in, you have it forever, and just kind of poke around, open up anything that's in brackets and check it out. All right, Julie.
Okay, so we want to close today just by reminding you of our invitation. Will you expand your thinking around inclusivity? Will you see the beauty and creativity in all? And will you help create wider and wider circles? And our ticket out the door for you is just in the chat. And you are not being graded or anything on this, but we want to hear one word that comes to mind when you think of our time together. So one word that comes to mind when you think of our time together. And of course, because choice is the friend of inclusion, you can put more than one word, because that's how we roll.
And then Tim or others, if you need something to close things up, we can stay around and answer questions or whatever, but I'm sure y'all need to do something to close the loop.
Thank you, Christy and Julie. That was, I mean, that was fascinating. And it's been years since I was an early childhood professional, and it's been years since my kids were young. And dang it all, these things are so applicable to what I am doing in my life and interacting with people and setting up spaces for groups of people. And it's just all so relevant to inviting people in to share the experience in a way that they feel they are welcomed and validated and have input into how that space is then transformed into an us space. So I would love to have you, if you're able to hang out for about 10 minutes, would love to open it up for some questions. I also totally give great permission to everybody who needs to stop watching and turn off your cameras, go do what you want. We will start with collaboration and coordination with Jen Biebler and Eva Shaw at 10:30. But until then, I will be sitting here and we'll do our best to field questions to Julie and Christy, if that sounds good to you guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, we call the leave meeting button the love you gotta go button. So if it seems rude to hit the leave right when I'm talking, just think of it as when you click it, you just said love you gotta go.
So
Any
please,
questions about the dashboard, about what we said?
were you able to go back? And I know there was that one question in chat. Do you feel you were able to answer that about the OT and parental?
Good question. Julie, did you
Permissions?
want to say anything more about that, or do you need to see the question again?
Yeah, so Jody, was that your question?
Yep, it was.
Yeah, go ahead and ask it again and make sure or do we handle it?
I feel like you handled it. We just, in our 4K classrooms, you know, we often get the question of where and when does OT need to be part of the conversation, and you know, when do we need parental consent in order to really make sure that this is okay with the parents, that, you know, tools are being used. And so that's kind of a continuous conversation when we're adding in different tools in the classroom. And so that was kind of the biggest question.
Yeah, and I'll just add to it, Jody. Things like weighted items, if you're talking about any kind of weighted item with small children, you're going to want to explain what's it for, what does it help with, and you're going to want to let kids make decisions about it, and you're going to want to let parents know about it, because as you well know, weighted items are helpful for lots of kids.
Yep.
And you don't want them destroyed, ruined, or all those things. So I know there's just so many things to think about, but what you want to share with families is these are the tools we use to learn here, and have OT work with any kid who's going to use them safely. Yeah, that's my opinion. That's an opinion, but I love that you're having deep conversations about that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question about the inclusive schooling site.
Yes.
Is that something that's available to, like, that it would be available to my staff, or do they, because I know you have to get in with a password and that, is that something I can share, or is that just, you know, I'm just wondering how accessible that is.
Yes. So you can share it with your staff, and you can share today's recording as far as we're concerned.
Yeah,
If someone
and
else
Katie
tells
said that they're okay too, Julie. Katie
Okay.
and Tim said it's all good. So,
Oh, great.
Lori, that password protected is usually because it's been recorded, and so we don't want it just to be out on the World Wide Web, and anybody
Okay.
can see anybody in a session where they may have a question or have a professional conversation. So, it sounds like everyone knew that today was being recorded and that the group has given permission. So even though it's password protected, you may share the dashboard with your staff. Okay.
Okay, so then they can have access to all the articles and
Yeah.
recordings in there. Perfect. Thank
And
you.
you can
so
also
much.
extract them. I mean, you can also like just download them and put them on your own website or in a newsletter. All of
okay.
those links are, for the most part, open source. They're in a blog we've written or in an article or a video. So nothing is proprietary. It's all copyright protected and you have permission to use.
Okay, great. What a wonderful resource. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And I did put the link for the families on there too. I'll just share one last time, so you'll see what changed. You might want to refresh your screen. Here's our May 11th. The recording can get posted here as well. And then I mentioned we have an extra page that Julie and I have just put together, resources for families. And so you can just scroll down, again, our definition. There's things for supporting through the IEP process. We have a cadre of family advocates and lawyers and parents of kids with disabilities that work with us that you can connect with. And you'll just find lots and lots of things to click on here as well.
Okay, great. Thank
Okay.
you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Well, that certainly will keep me busy and front loading Facebook for the next couple of months. Thank you so much for that, for
You're
giving me,
welcome.
all sorts of things to do.
Good.
But it looks awesome. Other questions from anyone? Kate?
Hi there.
Hi, Kate.
I'm wondering, do you have any tools for problem solving with teams? So around.
I'll get the blog, Julie, but go ahead. Keep going. Give you a good question. Yeah,
So-
sorry, Katie. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I want to make sure that we knew what you wanted before I jumped in. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like if you're working with an early childhood team, then you're trying to problem solve around the student needs. Do you offer any tools to do that?
Yep. Julie, you want to talk about it and I'll get the link?
Sorry, Christy, can you hear me?
Oh, now I can. Sorry, I
Okay,
had you
my-
muted, so I couldn't see you. Sorry.
Yeah, my headphones stopped working.
Kate, I'm putting something in the link, but we'll describe it. And I'll put it on the dashboard too.
So in the book, 30 Days to the Co-Taught Classroom, that was on my desk, but it's just hiding. So, oh, here it is. In this book, we have several different, so this is about how to co-teach and work with one another. And there's a lot of problem solving options in here, the 15-minute problem solving session, the 5-minute problem solving session, a lot of different ones, but it's all about sort of the how to bring people's ideas together and make a decision and and move on that decision and not spend time just looking at the problem from every direction, which is what we tend to do. And so we've also made a blog out of that called Turning Problems into Possibilities. And it's exactly that. It's how to problem solve with teams.
And it's a 5-minute problem solving technique. And Julie and I demonstrate how to do it. And there's a handout with all the steps. So if you grab that blog, Kate, it's how to solve any problem in just 5 minutes. But it helps as a segue in, especially if there are strong feelings about the thing under discussion.
And Kate, it's not like, should I get a divorce? Yes or no. That's the 15-minute problem solving process that we have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any final questions before we let these two fantastic people go? Okay, I'm going to assume that most people are away from their computers now and taking a little bit of visual break and a little bit of auditory break. But Julie and Christy, thank you so much for the insight, the presentation, the energy, the style, the inclusiveness, the resources. I could go on and on, but I really appreciate you being with us today and helping us move forward in Wisconsin. I hope you have a great rest of your days.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.
And